Ukraine just keeps on picking those Wildberries. The warehouses and logistics infrastructure of Russia's largest online retailer continue to burn, as Ukraine rains a hailstorm of drones onto them. The company's CEO is furious. Russian entrepreneurs who rely on Wildberries for their businesses and customers who purchase from the site are frothing with even more rage. But as for Putin, he's worried, and he should be. That's because Ukraine's Wildberries strikes aren't just about shattering one of Russia's largest domestic e-commerce companies. It goes deeper than that. These strikes are the catalyst for something that nobody expected: the complete collapse of the Russian economy. We head first to Ryazan. In this city, only a couple hundred kilometers from the Russian capital Moscow, sits the fifth largest logistics hub belonging to Wildberries. Or should we say, sat. It isn't there anymore. The hub, which is part of a massive network operated by a company that is often referred to as Russia's version of Amazon, lies in ruins after a devastating Ukrainian drone strike tore it to pieces. Black smoke rose over the warehouse following the attack, which was so massive that it tore through the building's roof and even ignited a nearby oil refinery. Emergency evacuations were triggered. Wildberries employees were evacuated and even some casualties were reported. But the headline for Ukraine was that it had just cost Wildberries millions, perhaps even billions of dollars, with an attack designed to be part of a larger strategy to paralyze the grey market giant that plays a bigger role in Russia's war economy than Putin ever wants to admit. What happened in Ryazan has been happening all over Russia. Wildberries facilities are going down left, right and center. The numbers vary, but the results are the same. On August 2nd, technology.org reported that Ukraine had successfully hit 11 of Wildberries' 25 Russian warehouses. The New Voice of Ukraine put the number at 12, likely because it counted an attack against a facility in Russia's Vladimir region on August 3rd that happened after the technology.org article. The New Voice of Ukraine also said that this Vladimir strike meant that Ukraine had hit 12 of the company's 15 largest warehouses, suggesting that Ukraine is following a strategy of taking out the biggest facilities first, then it's going to work its way down to the rest. In fact, it's already doing that. On August 4th came another attack. This time, Ukraine's drones found their mark at 2 Wildberries warehouses, along with attacking another logistical site that is reported to be part of the company's network near Moscow. This time, Ukraine struck warehouses in the Tver and St. Petersburg regions. The latter strike will really rattle Putin. St. Petersburg is his hometown. It's one of the jewels in the Russian crown, and it's meant to be one of the most well-defended cities in the entire country. None of that mattered on August 4th, as there seemed to be nothing in place to protect the city's Wildberries warehouse. And even as we were in the process of creating this video, more strikes were happening. August 5th brought with it news of attacks against Wildberries warehouses in Tatarstan and Tula, with the same results that we've been seeing for the last few weeks. Massive fires, plumes of smoke, untold amounts of products that were supposed to be sold via Wildberries getting destroyed. By the time you're watching this video, Ukraine may have carried out even more strikes. The damage done is still being calculated, likely because it changes every day as more warehouses burn. On August 4th, AA suggested that potential losses to Wildberries sellers may be as high as $3.5 billion already, none of which has been repaid to the sellers by Wildberries. The company has spent around $500,000 on compensation, though that money has been sent to the families of those who have been injured or killed in Ukraine's attacks. That mention of victims does bring up a possible moral grey area. Russia will argue that civilians are dying in the Wildberries strikes. That's certainly the argument put forth by Wildberries CEO, Russia's richest woman and a Putin supporter, Tatyana Kim. In a statement that reads as much as a desperate plea for Ukraine to stop as it is a condemnation of the strikes, Kim declared, "When attacking us, terrorists cover up their true motives and accuse us of allegedly selling military goods. But you can go to any global marketplace like Amazon or Alibaba and see if we have what they don't. There's no logic, common sense, or rationality in the terrorists' actions, and there can be none." A few things about that statement, Kim. There's nothing alleged about it when it comes to selling military goods. Wildberries does it, it's been doing it for years, and we're going to show you how deep that rabbit hole goes in a moment. But it's the references to global marketplaces and there being no logic to Ukraine's strikes that are the most ridiculous statements made. Kim can talk about Amazon and Alibaba all she wants, but she conveniently ignores the fact that neither has a presence in Russia, and despite what they sell, neither is actively supporting Putin's invasion efforts against Ukraine. As for no logic, it's quite the opposite. There's plenty of logic. Russia's economists can tell you that, as will we. Now let's get back to this whole allegedly selling military goods angle that Kim makes. The Kyiv Post ran an interesting expose on what Wildberries sells at around the same time as Ukraine began its Wildberries attacks. Before those strikes, you could type in the word drone and find a massive selection of drones, including Mavic 3 and Mavic 4 drones that are easily converted into FPV strike drones, plastered all over Wildberries. You could also find plenty of quadcopters labeled as FPV in a clear signal to soldiers who use these types of drones on the front. Searching a little deeper, it was possible to find payload retention and bomb release mechanisms for these drones, often hidden away in nondescript categories such as electronics or auto parts. And in the clothing section of Wildberries, you didn't have to look far to find tactical gear such as chest rigs that are worn over body armor and can be used to store magazines for rifles. There was even a category on Wildberries for the special military operation. As we said, there's nothing alleged about what Ukraine claims Wildberries sells. However, we use the past tense in that little segment for a reason. Wildberries has been working hard to scrub any traces of these items off its online storefront, likely to prop up Kim's claim that Ukraine alleges military hardware is sold but doesn't have proof. On July 26th, the Kyiv Independent reported that military goods sold on Wildberries are being hidden in search results. The goods are still technically there, but Wildberries is trying to make it seem as though they aren't by making it harder for customers to find them. Specifically, Wildberries has started hiding results for search terms like SVO, which is the Russian abbreviation for the Special Military Operation. This is a weak attempt to hide what the platform has sold in the past, and continues to sell now if you look hard enough. Before Ukraine's strikes, a search for everything for the SVO returned over 200,000 results, the Moscow Times says. Now, it's zilch, nada, nothing. But there's a catch. All that Wildberries has really done is blacklisted the SVO abbreviation. All of the products that would have popped up for these types of searches are still available on Wildberries, says United 24 Media. You just have to use different search terms to find them. The outlet says that a Russian media source named Boktak has proven that by finding helmets marked as tested in the SVO by using other keywords. And the SVO blacklisting doesn't even work well. Searches for SVO goods, SVO supplies, and SVO accessories still produce results. If Kim's goal is to reinforce her argument that the Wildberries strikes serve no military purpose, then she isn't doing a good job of it with this half-cocked attempt to hide the military products that are sold on her platform. They're still there, they can be found and bought just as they could before. Well, some of them can be. A lot of what was being sold is little more than ashes in the ruins of warehouses now, all due to Ukraine's attacks. We clearly see a military purpose behind Ukraine's Wildberries strikes, which immediately contradicts Kim's claims there is no logic to what's happening. But it goes much deeper than that, almost to the point where taking military hardware off the market is a bonus, rather than the main objective. For Ukraine, it's what these strikes have triggered in Russia that is the real goal. Economic damage is what Ukraine wants, and boy, has it achieved that damage. But before we go deeper and highlight why Wildberries strikes change everything for the Kremlin, this is a reminder that you're watching The Military Show. If you're getting insight from our channel, then remember to subscribe and activate notifications so you see more of what we have coming up. Wildberries is vital for Russia's economy. Certainly far more important than the Kremlin would ever want to admit. Remember that this is the Russian version of Amazon, and like Amazon, Wildberries basically serves as a hub for thousands upon thousands of business owners, who all rely on the platform for sales and the warehouses for stocking and shipping the products their customers purchase. Wildberries isn't just an online retailer, it's a massive logistics network that a huge portion of the Russian economy relies upon. Around 10% of the company's warehouse space has been destroyed by Ukraine's attacks by July 29th, along with the stock that space held. The percentage will be much higher now as Ukraine's relentless attacks have continued. Sellers are already cracking as they lose big. One seller told the BBC that she'd lost almost $13,000 of stock, and another said, "We're already getting screwed over from every direction as it is." Wildberries, along with its main rival Ozon, is used by up to 90% of Russia's economically active population. This is no small business that Ukraine is targeting. For many in Russia, Wildberries is everything. It's their source of income, where they get their clothes and accessories they use at home, and one of their key lifelines in a war that has unexpectedly arrived at their doorstep. And that's the point. None of this economic pain at the personal level is accidental. Ukraine wants to inflict it. Unlike Russia, Ukraine doesn't target civilians directly with its drone strikes. What it can do is attack militarily relevant facilities that also happen to be used by civilians, and Wildberries falls under that umbrella. This is Ukraine bringing the war back home to Russia, and it's an incredibly effective technique. Damage a linchpin of the Russian economy, and the people who rely on that linchpin get angry. Perhaps so angry that they'll call on Putin to end his insane war. Sellers are losing out big now that so many Wildberries warehouses are burning. We mentioned the $3.5 billion in destroyed stock already. That will obviously hurt Wildberries. But that's $3.5 billion of money that the platform sellers won't be making, which also means that it's $3.5 billion that could have been spent on things like building businesses, hiring employees, or just covering the day-to-day expenses of Russians who relied on Wildberries to make a living. According to Medusa, Wildberries has recently started offering some compensation to its sellers, but not much. Only small companies and individual entrepreneurs have received anything from the company, and what they receive is only a fraction of the value of the products that they've lost. Support keeps on being promised, but it's yet to come in any meaningful fashion. And as more time goes on, a lot of Russia's small businesses are going to collapse due to cash flow issues. As for buyers, what can we say other than the rules of supply and demand are a bitch? Imagine what would happen if Amazon lost a bunch of its warehouses in fires, taking stock with it. Supply would fall off a cliff, and suddenly that $10 top you were planning on buying would cost $20. That's basic supply and demand economics, and Russians who use Wildberries are already feeling the impact of Ukraine's strikes on their bank balances. In an August 1st report, the Kyiv Post revealed that prices on Wildberries had surged by between 10 and 30%. This is inflation at warp speed, and it's only going to get worse as more of Wildberries' locations go down under Ukrainian drone fire. Companies that sell via Wildberries are doing everything they can to cover spiraling costs, including cancelling discounts and choosing cheaper delivery options. What Ukraine has found here is perhaps one of the most unexpected pressure points of the entire war so far. Ukraine's goal is to cripple Russia economically, ensuring that Putin can't fund his invasion in the process. Wildberries for so long had been untouched. But what we're quickly finding out is that these attacks could be the key that unlocks the door to Russia's economic ruin. Wildberries is a choke point for a huge portion of the Russian economy, DW News points out. It's also a company that carries $10 billion worth of debt, which it can do solely because it's supported by Russia's state-owned banks. This is where we see a link to Putin's war chest emerge. If Putin wants to keep Wildberries running, and he should, due to the impact this platform has on the lives of his people, then he is going to have to tell the banks to bail the company out. That money has to come from somewhere, and it will be the same sources that Russia relies upon to fund the war. And if Putin chooses not to help Wildberries with state funds, he risks causing a domino effect of economic catastrophe. Wildberries will collapse, the businesses owned by its many sellers will follow suit, and consumers who are already dealing with supply and demand issues can do nothing as their alternatives all jack up their prices because one of their biggest competitors has crumbled into dust. It's a lose-lose situation for Putin, just as Ukraine planned it. It seems like Putin and his state-run banking system have already made their collective choice. In a July 29th report, CNBC revealed that the Kremlin has already acknowledged that it will likely need to step in to prop up Wildberries while these attacks are ongoing, and that the state-controlled bank VTB will likely play a crucial role in what would inevitably become a bailout program implemented at a cost to the Russian taxpayer. Other banks, such as Sberbank, have announced loan restructuring programs targeted at Wildberries investors because it's terrified that the loss of more warehouses could lead to a spate of bankruptcies that will put the bank in a very bad position of losing out on thousands of loans that it has approved for Wildberries sellers. In an August 4th report, Global Data added that the Kremlin is now looking at programs to support vendors, likely for the same reasons as Sberbank. Several options are being discussed. Sellers may be allowed to suspend loan repayments for up to a year, which we're sure Russia's banks are going to love. There's the restructuring we mentioned earlier, along with subsidized working capital loans offered through microfinance institutions with state backing. So more loans on top of the loans that vendors can't pay. The Kremlin is scrambling for solutions. And every passing day only makes the situation worse because Ukraine's drones just won't stop coming. Ukraine has opened up a brand new front in the war with Russia, and it's a front that is confined within Russia itself. This is an attack on the country's logistics. It's the destruction of military hardware coupled with the economic pressure being placed on vendors, buyers, and banks. Every attack that Ukraine carries out doesn't only incur costs related to lost stock and rebuilding. Wildberries and Russia itself, if the state-backed solutions come into play, has to figure out how to deal with increased business operating costs, loan servicing due to cash flow issues, and sellers who may migrate to other platforms after losing so much with Wildberries. As we said, it's a domino effect. If Wildberries falls, it takes a huge chunk of Russia's economy with it. On the back end of all this are inflationary risks, which we're already starting to see come into play. RBC Ukraine also points out that the median revenue of a Wildberries vendor is just $7,500, which means they don't have much wiggle room financially. A week or two's worth of shocks can be enough to push many of these small business owners into negative cash flow situations, and that's happening as we speak. All of this couldn't have come at a worse time for Russia, which is already dealing with a difficult economic situation that reveals just how much of a mistake Putin made by transforming the country's economy with his focus on the military-industrial complex. In a July 13th report before the Wildberries strikes began, Forbes labeled Russia's economy as one that is slowly sinking. It's difficult to argue that point. In 2026, Russia itself predicts that its economy will only grow by 0.4%, which puts the country on the edge of a recession. This is also an optimistic projection. Forbes says that Putin's war is going to run at least $28 billion over budget in 2026, and that number will rise by a further $54 billion in both 2027 and 2028. The only reason why Russia isn't doing worse than it already is in 2026 is that the war in Iran gives it a slight reprieve due to its impact on oil prices. Without that, Russia would be in even more economic trouble. Losing Wildberries or having to spend billions on supporting it only adds to these problems. Will the destruction of Wildberries' warehouses alone be enough to cripple the Russian economy? No. But this strategy is another piece of the puzzle locked into place by Ukraine. So if Kim is looking for the logic in all of this, she just found it. Wildberries is a target for all of the reasons we just explained. Kim got into bed with Putin. She's just woken up to discover that her company's warehouses are being covered in drone-shaped explosive fleas. There's another element to the Wildberries strikes that we've only touched on here. Ukraine wants to cause economic turmoil in Russia, sure. But it also wants that turmoil to serve the purpose of pressuring Russia's people into turning against Putin. The psychological blow is as important as the economic one. And you can find out why if you watch our video. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to The Military Show, as we track every key event in the war between Russia and Ukraine. And thank you for watching.